Hello and welcome to Think Watercolour. Today's demonstration is about painting in a loose impressionistic style and how by using strong darks you can make colours pop and bring your painting to life. This is a sketch of summer flower pots on a bright sunny day. They're at the base of a pergola and in front of the wooden retaining wall of a raised flower bed. So let me show you how I made this sketch. This is Saunders Waterford 300-gram rough white paper, and I've loosely sketched the image out in pencil on the paper. And I'm going to start with the first washes, which are going to be using very watery mixes. This is a mixture of permanent rose and a small amount of Winsor red for the flowers. Just going to sketch those in first, get them located. Again, it's the first wash and it's the lightest light. It's going to dry much lighter than this, and I'll probably lift out a few even lighter patches with some clear water. Just dropping in a few darker patches there for a little bit more pigment. Mixing wet in wet, letting everything blend together. As I said at the start, this is a very impressionistic painting. Don't intend to put lots of detail in the plants. A little bit of detail for the pots and the pergola, but other than that, very loose style. Just lifting out a few areas to make them even lighter. Not quite white, but almost white. For the flags of the patio, I've mixed up a very light sepia wash just for the base colour. Again, I'm just putting in all the lights first, working from lightest light to the darkest dark. This is some very weak raw sienna for the underpainting of the pots, leaving some of the patches on the pots pretty much white to reflect the sunlight. This will help with a contrast against the darkest darks once I get those in. Just using the same colours just to put the underpainting of the shadows on the structure of the pergola. Just mixing up some Aureolin yellow with some sap green, just for the lightest lights of the leaves and the foliage in the background. Again, it's the first wash, very light, very loose. Adding a little bit more pigment here and there just to darken a few areas. Trick is not to try and paint every leaf. If you do that, it becomes a botanical study, and this is all about loose, fresh watercolours. Just have to indicate what's there and the eye will do the rest. Just dropping in a little bit of cobalt teal to vary the tones of the leaves for the lightest lights. I've let that dry and I'm just mixing up some ultramarine and burnt sienna for a nice bluish grey for the lighter shadow on the patio. While that shadow wash is still wet, I'm just adding a little bit more ultramarine and burnt sienna to darken the grey for the deepest shadows around the pots. Letting everything blend wet in wet. The painting is now reaching what I call the ugly stage. It looks like it's never going to work. You have to persevere with watercolours. Some people give up at this stage. They think, oh, it's wishy-washy, it's never going to look good. The trick is to keep going and work on the darkest darks when you can, just to bring the painting together and bring it alive. For the pergola, I'm using cobalt teal and a touch of cerulean blue. And you can see where I've painted the cobalt teal and cerulean blue over the shadows, it starts to bring the painting to life and add depth. Just using that same mix with a little bit more cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, sorry, into the mix, just for the that wooden supporting wall for the raised flower bed. Again, I've let that dry and I've now mixed up some jadeite green with some ultramarine to create the deepest shadows for the background. Just making sure to leave some lighter patches to indicate some leaves just catching the sunlight. Helps to add depth. And as you can see, starting to put these darks in, the painting starts to come alive and have some shape to it. You find if you squint at the subject, you take away the detail and you see the shapes of the various tones. It just allows you to be freer with your painting. As I said before, don't try and paint every leaf, just suggest that there are leaves there catching the sunlight and lots of deep shadow because it's a bright sunny day. There are lots of ways of making greens, mixing them yourself, or you can use, as I have here, two of my favourite greens for foliage, sap green and jadeite green. You mix them together and add a little bit of yellow, sometimes aureolin or cadmium yellow. You can get a huge variety of greens for foliage. It just speeds things up if you're using stuff that's already mixed, but please try mixing your own. You can make a massive variety of greens just with aureolin and cobalt blue or ultramarine. The brushes I'm using here are Escoda Perlas, and I've got three different sizes here, and they're ideal for doing this sort of detail work. And when I say detail, I mean just controlling what you're doing rather than trying to paint exactly what you're looking at. It's an impressionist style, but sometimes you need a smaller brush to do the smaller parts. Just using a rigger to put some of the stalks of the flowers in. Again, not being too fussy as long as they suggest what's there. If painting flowers in detail is something you're interested, there are lots of tutorials on YouTube for that sort of thing. I personally prefer to do them and paint them in a looser style, but you can, if you take your time, you can get a really good representation of flowers, very accurate, but it's not my style of doing things. Just putting in the joints in the paving slabs for the patio. This is a much stronger mix of the permanent rose and Windsor red. For the more permanent rose than Windsor red, just a touch of Windsor red to change the colour slightly. For the darker flowers, these are fuchsias, and they hang down and very pretty flowers. Again, not trying to be accurate and paint it exact detail, just a suggestion of what they look like. And using that same mix, just dropping in some darker parts of the other flowers. Again, just reiterating what I said earlier, this adding these darks brings the whole painting to life and adds volume. Putting in that dark background throws everything else forward, so it adds depth to the painting too. Just darkening those shadows around the pots with some ultramarine, a touch of burnt sienna, more ultramarine than burnt sienna. Just helps to throw the pots forward, gives them depth. Using the same colour, just putting in a few shadowy areas on the flowers, the bigger flowers. Just added a few minor details, cracks in the wood of the pergola and a few bits and pieces lying on the ground, and I think I'm pretty much finished. As always, thank you so much for watching this YouTube video. I hope you found it useful, and if you did, please give it a like. It always helps with YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for future videos, and thanks again for watching.